Ever wonder what men really want in a woman? Laura did too. So much so that she decided to do something most of us would only dream of, or maybe dread. She went back to her ex to find out. What she discovered along the way wasn't just about him, it was about herself, and changed everything she thought she knew about love. This is Laura's story. Laura, 30 and independent, loved her life. Great friends, a steady job, and a cozy city apartment. But dating? It was a revolving door of first dates that never went anywhere. After another lackluster evening ending with a polite hug, she slumped home, questioning whether she was too focused on her career or simply too independent. Out of nowhere, she thought of Jake, her ex. They had ended things amicably, and if anyone could give her honest insight, it would be him. Taking a deep breath, she texted him, "Hey Jake, do you have time to catch up? I could use your insight on something." Almost instantly, he replied, "Sure, let's grab coffee Saturday." The day arrived, and Laura's nerves were in overdrive. What if he thought she was crazy for reaching out? Jake came as she paced outside the cafe, his familiar smile sparking a wave of nostalgia. "Hey stranger," as he greeted her. After a few pleasantries, she got to the point. "I've been wondering, what do men really want in a relationship?" "That's a pretty loaded question," Jake replied. "But honestly, I think it comes down to acceptance." Laura thought about all the times she had tried to change herself to fit a guy. But what if who they are isn't enough? Jake's expression turned serious. "It's not just about you being enough. It's about finding someone who sees you for who you are," he said. "Changing to fit someone else's mold never works." His words hit her hard. Laura had spent so long trying to meet others' expectations that she'd forgotten to check in with herself. As they talked, she felt a new clarity emerging. "Maybe focus on being you without the pressure of meeting someone else's ideal," Jake suggested. As she left, a sense of relief washed over her. She now knew that understanding herself might be the first step to finding the connection she wanted. There was hope in her heart, a glimmer of light in the darkness of her confusion. Laura couldn't shake Jake's words. It's about finding someone who sees you for who you are. They stuck with her, pointing out how often she bent to fit someone else's mold. For days, she drifted in a haze of self-reflection, grappling with frustration and hope. She was the friend who listened and brought life to every gathering. But in love, she felt like she was wandering in the dark. One evening, curled up with a glass of wine and a rom-com playing in the background, she envied the effortless romance on screen. "Why can't I just have that?" she muttered. All her dates blurred together, men who turned out to be distant or indifferent. Her attempts feeling like trying to force a square peg into a round hole. Desperate for clarity, she picked up her phone, scrolling through contacts, wondering who she could ask. And there it was, Jake's name staring back at her. The idea thrilled and terrified her. He'd always been blunt. He'd give her the truth. With shaky hands, she typed, "Hey Jake, can we meet again? I need some insight." Panic hit as she sent it. The seconds felt like hours as she waited for his reply. But he immediately replied, "Sure, let's grab coffee Saturday." Relief washed over her, but so did the anxiety. What would she even ask? And would he tell her what she was dying to hear? Still, one thing was clear. It was time to face her fears, dig into her own story, and figure out what she wanted. On Saturday, Laura's nerves buzzed. She told herself it's just coffee, but she knew it was more. Today was about uncovering the mystery of what men wanted. As she entered the cafe, the warm scent of coffee greeted her, slightly calming her. She spotted Jake, his familiar smile easing her tension. "Hey, you made it," he greeted. After catching up briefly, Laura took a deep breath. "I want to know what men really want in a relationship. Why is it so hard to find someone who is the right fit?" Jake paused and thoughtfully replied, "I think men want connection, someone who accepts them without trying to change them." His words struck a chord. She thought of all the times she'd tried to transform her boyfriends, assuming she was bringing out the best in them. "But what if who they are isn't enough?" she asked. Jake shook his head. "It's about compatibility, not being enough. If you feel you must change someone, maybe you aren't accepting them for who they are." Her mind raced. She'd always thought supporting someone meant helping them grow, even if it meant bending herself to fit their needs. But Jake pointed out, you can support someone without losing yourself. Trying to mold someone else can make them feel inadequate. The truth of his words hit hard. She realized she'd been so focused on meeting others' expectations, she'd lost track of her own. What did she genuinely want? As the conversation deepened, Laura felt the walls around her heart crack. Jake's insights were opening her eyes, not just to relationships, but to herself. She left that cafe knowing this was the beginning of a journey, not just to understand men, but to rediscover who she was. Laura's mind raced as she left the cafe. Her conversation with Jake hadn't given her the answers she wanted, but had held up a mirror to parts of herself she'd avoided. Did she really try to mold people to fit her ideals? The thought gnawed at her as she walked home, barely noticing the crisp autumn air. Back in her apartment, she hugged a pillow, replaying Jake's words. If you're constantly trying to mold someone, it can make them feel inadequate. His words stung because she knew they were true. She thought back to her last relationship with Daniel. She'd loved him, hadn't she? But she'd been frustrated with his lack of drive, pushing him to become someone she thought he could be. She'd convinced herself it was support, but now it felt clear that she'd wanted him to change. Scrolling through old photos, she stopped at one from a friend's wedding. They both looked happy, but now she saw something in Daniel's eyes. Maybe doubt or weariness. Had he felt the weight of her expectations? She wondered if he'd seen her desire to shape him all along. Her mind drifted to Jake's current girlfriend, Emily, who accepted Jake as he was. It wasn't jealousy that stirred within her. It was a realization that she hadn't realized how to truly accept someone without trying to change them. Fear gripped her. Could she ever learn to let people be? She knew she couldn't brush off this realization. It was time to confront it, to change. Sitting back, she closed her eyes, feeling the weight and a spark of hope, a quiet voice whispering that maybe she could learn to love differently this time. After talking with Jake, Laura was on an emotional roller coaster, questioning if her high expectations had always been the issue in her relationships. One afternoon, she saw a photo of Jake and his girlfriend Emily, laughing with the caption, "Here's to being unapologetically ourselves, together." Laura felt envious. She wanted to be loved for who she was without needing to change anyone else. Impulsively, she messaged Emily asking to meet. To her surprise, Emily agreed. When they sat for coffee, Laura felt intimidated by Emily's effortless confidence. But Emily's warmth eased her nerves. Laura asked, "How do you and Jake make it work? You seem so natural together." Emily smiled. "Honestly, I stopped trying to change him. Jake is who he is, quirks and all. I realized that loving him meant letting go of the urge to mold him into someone else." Emily's words hit home with Laura. She'd always thought her encouragements to improve were caring, but maybe they only made people feel inadequate. Emily continued, "It wasn't easy, but once I let go of that need, I found a freedom I hadn't felt before. And Jake, he's happier too, knowing he doesn't have to change to make me happy." Walking away from their conversation, Laura felt lighter, like a weight had been lifted. She still had work to do, but now she had clarity. Loving someone wasn't about lowering her standards, but embracing them as they were. With a new perspective, Laura knew she was ready to find a relationship built on acceptance, starting with herself. Laura's talk with Emily had shifted something in her. She finally saw how much she'd tried to control relationships, always steering them in her ideal direction. Determined to change, she matched with Adam, a laid-back, go-with-the-flow type, on a dating app. Their first few dates were effortless. Art exhibits, long coffee chats, and shared laughs. Yet by the fourth date, old habits crept back. Adam didn't share her ambitious drive or her dream of exploring the world. Usually she'd try to fix that, but she reminded herself of Emily's advice: let people be themselves. At dinner, Adam mentioned he didn't feel drawn to travel. Laura, a passionate traveler, felt a little twinge of disappointment. Part of her wanted to ask if he'd reconsider for her, but she held back. Instead, she breathed and shared her love for travel without pushing. Adam smiled, saying, "That's great. I admire that about you. I'm just more of a homebody." It was a turning point. Laura realized she could accept their differences or move on, but didn't need to force him to fit her vision. She reached across the table, touching his hand. "We're different, and I think that's okay." Adam's relieved smile gave Laura a sense of peace she hadn't expected. She understood now that loving someone didn't mean molding them. She was letting go for once, and it felt terrifying and freeing. Laura didn't know where things with Adam would go, but she felt at peace, embracing him and herself as they were. After her date with Adam, Laura felt like she was stepping into the unknown. She'd always pictured her future with someone driven, sharing her dreams and ambitions. But now, that vision felt limited, like she'd been seeing life through a narrow lens. Over the next few weeks, Laura tried embracing a new approach. Adam's calm, present way of being surprised her, and she found herself enjoying the quiet moments they shared. One evening, as they sat on a park bench watching the sunset, Adam turned to her with a question. "I know we're different in many ways," he said, "but do you think this could work long term?" Laura's heart raced. Part of her wanted to say yes, to ignore the gaps between their dreams, but she also knew it would mean letting go of things she deeply valued. Pausing for a moment, she met his gaze. "I've thought about it a lot," she began. "I love being with you, and you've taught me so much about accepting people as they are. But I also know there are things I need that may not match your needs." Adam nodded, a bittersweet understanding passing between them. She squeezed his hand, feeling the weight of the moment. "Thank you for showing me what it means to accept someone fully," she said softly. "That's a lesson I'll carry with me." As they embraced goodbye, Laura felt a mixture of sadness and peace. She hadn't found the exact love she thought she wanted, but she'd found something invaluable, a newfound clarity. She was ready to find a relationship where she and her partner could be fully themselves, and that realization was enough. Leaving the park, Laura felt the weight of Adam's embrace still lingering. The walk home was heavy yet freeing. She'd let go not just of Adam, but of old patterns that held her back. For once, she was moving forward without a plan or someone to mold, and that uncertainty felt both exhilarating and terrifying. In the following days, Laura noticed subtle changes. She was more present, patient, and accepting. Instead of silently critiquing or envisioning improvements in others, she let people be themselves. This shift affected all her relationships. At work, she listened more, letting go of the need to fix things. With friends, she listened instead of offering solutions. These small changes felt monumental. Over dinner with an old friend, Jenna, Laura resisted steering the conversation or offering advice. When Jenna smiled and said, "I really needed that. Thank you," Laura felt a warmth she hadn't anticipated. She was finally learning that connection could come from simply being present. The fear of being alone lingered, yet she felt a quiet strength building, like she was finally aligned with herself. On her next date, she noticed the difference. She didn't feel the urge to impress or analyze compatibility. She left with a calm sense of contentment, knowing she'd be okay either way. Laura wasn't just seeking a partner anymore. She wanted someone who accepted her fully, just as she was, without needing change. And for once, she felt ready, grounded, open, and hopeful. She walked home confidently, knowing that true love began within herself, which was the most transformative love of all. This story's moral is that men, like anyone else, genuinely want to feel accepted for who they are, not who they could be. It's not about lowering your standards or compromising on your values. It's about understanding that real connection thrives when both people feel seen, appreciated, and free to be themselves. Men don't want to feel like projects or like they need to change to fit someone else's vision. They want a partner who recognizes their unique qualities and respects their individuality. So instead of molding someone into an ideal, focus on building a relationship based on mutual respect, understanding, and acceptance. After all, love isn't about fixing someone, but finding someone who feels right, just as they are.